This is Time Warner Cable's Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Judy Chu, member of the U.S. Congress. And I want to speak with you about the mood in Congress. When President Obama was reelected with a pretty good Democratic majority in terms of the votes, and the Senate went more Democratic, the House went more Democratic, I sensed there'd be an era of compromise, but we're not seeing that today.
We are seeing it on other issues such as immigration reform.
Are we, though?
Well, actually, we took a great step forward in terms of having a bipartisan group of senators put out a plan, and I thought that was very encouraging.
But let's talk more about the fiscal side, the budgetary side, because that's where the recalcitrance is very strong.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I think that the American people don't want to just go from one fiscal crisis to the next. What is even more disturbing is that these crises are manufactured.
And that's what we're hearing from nonpartisan economists. This is not a Democratic member of Congress saying that. We hear this over and over, that there's a frustration in Wall Street, there's a frustration in academia, that it's not as if it's a housing bust that is causing these crises. It's votes that had been taken in 2011 that were really meant as benchmarks and not to create bona fide draconian cuts.
That's right. There were these automatic budget cuts called sequestration that were proposed in the last year's fiscal crisis as a way of incentivizing some budget cuts. But in reality, there's been no solution. As a result, these cuts are very, very draconian. And in fact, some say that it will bring our GDP down by 30 points if they actually all went through.
And what we face today is congressional districts that appear to be more self-contained with voters like themselves. And so there's not a lot of fear by various members of Congress of voting away that may be what should be in terms of the country moving forward, because their voters are like themselves. So there's not the era of compromise.
Yes.
So what can be done?
Well, I do have to say that not all districts are like that.
Okay.
There are districts that have a mix of Democratic and Republican voters, and those are probably the districts to look at as far as influencing those Congress members. I also think that we can have votes where there are a certain number of Democrats and a certain number of Republicans. And in fact, on the Hurricane Sandy bill, which should have been a given, I couldn't see why it was a controversy at all.
Right.
Nonetheless, it did take a majority of the Democrats and a handful of Republicans.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because you surely know about what was known as the Hassert Rule, which was Republicans don't break to create a majority with the Democrats. And that's what's been happening. We have been seeing Republicans breaking from their party leadership to join a Democratic minority that becomes a majority. Do you think that can happen as we march forward?
It can happen. Yes, much more. And in fact, it may be the only way we can move forward as a nation. The reason I say this is because I think that Speaker Boehner really has trouble on the Republican side. He has a very entrenched, super conservative faction in his Republican caucus who don't want to spend money for anything and want to cut us to the bone, which will instead turn us into another Greece.
It's interesting because we've heard Republicans saying that about the nation generally. What do we do from here?
We need to have the American people speak up and say that we truly want that compromise. We truly want to have a permanent solution.
Her name is Judy Chu, member of the U.S. Congress. I'm Brad Palmer. Thanks for watching Time Warner Cable's Local Edition.